Imagine this. Picture yourself transported back to a shadowy night in ancient Egypt, deep in the BC era. Deep within the royal embalming chamber, a colossal stone slab cradles the lifeless form of the pharaoh's beloved wife, her regal features still etched with that haunting queenly poise, as if death hasn't fully claimed her yet. And looming over her, the kingdom's elite mummifier, a man sworn to the sacred arts. But tonight, his mission isn't the usual preservation ritual. No, far from it. He's been handed an order that shatters every holy tradition he's ever known. Extract a certain part from her body, the command echoes in his mind. Why on earth? That's a chilling secret locked away in the vaults of the elite. Right there, in that eerie moment, the glossy facade of Egypt's iconic symbols starts to crack, revealing a nightmarish reality lurking beneath. Folks, what do we typically get fed about ancient Egypt in our classrooms, or those glossy museum exhibits? Shimmering golden sarcophagi, those jaw-dropping pyramids piercing the sky, enigmatic hieroglyphs that whisper ancient mysteries, and those graceful murals depicting gods and pharaohs in eternal harmony. Like the whole civilization was straight out of a divine fairy tale, blessed by the heavens themselves. But hold on tight, because the unfiltered truth, it's a whole lot darker, more savage, and utterly distorted. Think about those buttoned-up Victorian-era scholars. They deliberately buried the evidence under layers of censorship. Papyrus scrolls packed with jaw-dropping revelations that were deemed too scandalous for public eyes. Secret inscriptions carved into temple walls that tourists are strictly forbidden from glimpsing. These hidden gems are bursting with accounts of sexual practices and ceremonies that would make your blood run cold. Things we never dared to dream up. I swear to you right here and now, the tale I'm about to unfold will absolutely demolish the polished image of ancient Egypt you've carried around in your head all these years. From the intimate confines of the pharaoh's private quarters to the solemn altars of the grandest temples, sex wasn't merely about personal gratification or fleeting pleasures. Oh no, it was wielded as a cosmic instrument to uphold the very order of the universe, manipulated as a ruthless political tool, and horrifically, it demanded the grinding sacrifice of innocent children's bodies and spirits. Doesn't that send a shiver down your spine? Yet every bit of this is grounded in solid archaeological digs and those age-old documents that have survived the sands of time. Pause for a second and really chew on this. In their worldview, if the pharaoh couldn't perform sexually, if he was impotent, the mighty Nile River would cease its life-giving floods, the fertile fields would turn to dust bowls, and famine would ravage the land. His virility was literally tied to the nation's survival. So that royal bedroom. Forget privacy, it was the pulsating heart, the powerhouse engine that propelled the entire cosmos forward. Every single intimate act was seen as a binding pact with the divine forces. Sounds completely bonkers to our modern ears, doesn't it? But that was the bedrock of their unshakable beliefs. Here's where it gets truly twisted and grim. This core faith didn't stay pure, it veered into shadowy territories. The rulers and the aristocracy brandished sex like a weapon to cling to their thrones and dominance. The temple priests, they spun elaborate justifications, claiming these outlandish sexual rites were nothing less than direct dialogues with the gods themselves. And who bore the brunt of this madness? The most vulnerable, the children. Little boys and girls yanked from their family homes as offerings, or young captives dragged in chains from distant battlefields as slaves. These kids had zero say in the matter. Their fragile bodies were treated as communal property of the religion, mere instruments to appease the deities. And believe me, this is just the gateway. Our journey into the heart of Egypt's macabre legacy is about to kick off in earnest. We'll peel back layer after layer of these unsettling proofs, and trust me, they'll force-feed you some profoundly disturbing realities about human nature. Are you braced? Let's plunge into the very first piece of evidence. To the ancient Egyptians, sexual energy transcended mere physical indulgence or animalistic urges. In their eyes, it was the raw, pulsating force that animated the entire universe. Just imagine it. When two lovers entwined, it wasn't simply a private union of souls and bodies. It was an active communion with the celestial beings. The peak of ecstasy? Far from a selfish thrill, it was a sacred ritual, a direct transmission of pleas and messages to the gods above. Even the positions they chose, each one meticulously crafted as a physical embodiment of prayer, a bodily supplication. At first glance, that might strike you as somewhat poetic, even enchanting, right? But oh, the nightmare lurking underneath. This exalted belief system morphed into a brutal pretext for oppressing the powerless. Children, enslaved people, anyone without a voice. Kids' bodies were outright declared divine assets, owned by the gods and thus exploitable by the priests. Religion became the ultimate shield, whitewashing every atrocity. Your existence is for divine service, so surrender your flesh to us. Horrific, isn't it? But flip through those ancient scrolls, and you'll see it spelled out in black and white. No ambiguity. Shifting gears now, let's zero in on the mummies themselves, these preserved relics that have fascinated us for centuries. Recall that legendary excavation moment? It was 1922 when Howard Carter, the intrepid archaeologist, carefully unraveled the wrappings around young King Tutankhamun's remains. The global press went into a frenzy, headlines screaming discovery. But what Carter actually beheld in that tomb? That's the stuff history books conveniently gloss over or outright omit. The pharaoh's genitals had been surgically excised, gone, vanished, with surgical precision evident in the clean scars. And get this, Tut wasn't an isolated case. Dig deeper into other royal mummies and patterns emerge, similar mutilations across the board. In some instances, it wasn't just removal. The organs appeared modified, almost ritually enhanced or reshaped. Even more bone-chilling, clues point to these procedures happening not post-mortem, but while the victims were still breathing. Consider this obscure prince from the 18th dynasty, his identity lost to time. Examinations of his skeletal remains, particularly the pelvic region, reveal unmistakable signs of genital removal during his lifetime. Scars that healed over years. This wasn't some crude punishment for a crime. Ancient inscriptions hammer home the purpose, to render the deceased more flawless in the afterlife. It was a deliberate ceremony, a profound religious observance. Is your mind reeling yet? Doesn't it boggle the brain? They believed that to achieve ultimate perfection in the eternal realm, one must first desecrate the earthly form through such barbaric acts. It's a staggering paradox, yet to the Egyptians it was flawless logic. By severing these parts, they thought they were presenting a purer, more devoted sacrifice to the divine. So you might be wondering, how come none of this made it into our school curriculums, or those family-friendly documentaries? The culprit? A sweeping conspiracy of silence orchestrated by those prudish Victorian archaeologists in the 19th century. They unearthed these grisly details, but chose to bury them again, erasing mentions from official reports, or worse, smashing artifacts to smithereens. Why? Because in their straight-laced society, such revelations were branded as obscene, unfit for civilized discourse. Visualize the scene. Europe in the throes of Egyptomania, with high society clamoring for exotic treasures. A pharaoh's ornate golden death mask. That could be paraded in grand exhibitions, drawing crowds and fortunes. But admitting that Tut's body bore signs of ritual castration, unthinkable. It would tarnish the romantic allure and scandalize the patrons. Thus, the scholars opted for discretion, sweeping the dirt under the rug. What we've inherited is an airbrushed version of Egypt, all sparkle and majesty, with the gruesome undercurrents banished from the spotlight. All right, I dare you, step closer into this abyss with me. In ancient Egypt, sex wasn't reducible to base human instincts or romantic liaisons. No, it was elevated, or should I say perverted, into a form of hallowed brutality, all under the banner of harnessing universal energies. The pharaoh was duty-bound to engage in these acts to ensure the Nile's bountiful floods and the land's prosperity. Nobles had to demonstrate their elite status through elaborate sexual displays, proving their worthiness to rule. And inevitably, at the base of this pyramid, the expendables, wide-eyed children, chained slaves, and forgotten souls whose suffering fueled the machine. This wasn't haphazard deviance, it was a meticulously engineered hierarchy, a societal blueprint etched in stone. At the pinnacle sat the pharaoh, his sexual prowess equated with cosmic harmony and the Nile's rhythmic pulses. His bedchamber transformed from a sanctuary of rest into a national command center, where every encounter safeguarded the kingdom's very existence. Descending the ladder, we find the priests and aristocrats, not mere mortals, but intermediaries bridging the human and the divine. They were compelled to enact these rites to validate their exalted positions. Think of it as a perverse initiation rite or a status symbol etched in flesh. And who occupied the lowest rung, the foundation holding it all up? The defenseless ones, particularly the young and the enslaved. These unfortunates were deemed essential fodder for the system's perpetuation, their lives commodified in the name of religion and politics. Imagine the personal torment. A child, barely understanding the world, torn from loving arms and thrust into this vortex of exploitation. Back then, parents didn't view this as tragedy. They celebrated it as the pinnacle of honor, dedicating their offspring to the temples like offering a prized possession. For the child, escape was a pipe dream, smothered by familial expectations at home and the iron-fisted authority of the clergy within sacred walls. From tender ages, they were indoctrinated. Your body isn't yours, it's a vessel for the gods, your life a tribute. But let's not kid ourselves, this wasn't solely driven by blind zealotry. Economics played a starring role too. Wealthy clans and temple institutions were entangled in a web of mutual benefit, sustaining this cycle like a well-oiled enterprise that demanded constant recruits to keep churning. The most terrifying aspect: society at large didn't perceive this as evil. They embraced it with pride. Families boasted, "We've consecrated our child to the divine service." The collective delusion was so pervasive that individual cries of agony were silenced, drowned in the chorus of communal approval. How could such a monstrosity endure for millennia? The formula was deceptively straightforward. A toxic blend of religious rationalization, relentless societal coercion, and the vested interests of the ruling class, all harmonizing to crush the weak underfoot. Okay, everyone, inhale deeply and steady yourselves. Up to now, we've dissected the skeletal framework, the cold architecture of control. But brace for impact, because what's coming next plunges us into a whirlwind of national delirium. A festival that engulfed the entire populace in unbridled frenzy. Yes, the infamous Festival of Drunkenness. Envision it. Every societal barrier shattering, metropolises dissolving into utter pandemonium. Let's dissect this notorious Egyptian spectacle, shall we? The Festival of Drunkenness. Even the title drips with foreboding intrigue, doesn't it? But don't mistake it for a light-hearted beer bash with tunes and merriment. This was an officially sanctioned descent into collective lunacy, where the whole nation voluntarily or compulsorily shed their sanity in a ritualistic storm. It honored Hathor, the deity of affection, intoxication, and revelry. Yet trace its origins, and you unearth a far more sinister legend. The saga of Sekhmet, the ferocious lion-headed goddess dispatched to annihilate humankind. Driven by an insatiable thirst for blood, she rampaged unchecked, slaughtering indiscriminately. The other gods, alarmed at the impending extinction, hatched a cunning ploy. They dyed vast quantities of beer blood red, tricking Sekhmet into guzzling it down as if it were her victim's life force. Intoxicated, her fury ebbed, and she metamorphosed into the benevolent Hathor. The festival reenacted this myth. Participants imbibed to emulate the goddess, convinced that in their inebriated state they became conduits for divine essence. To attain sacredness, one had to abandon reason entirely. Madness as the pathway to enlightenment. How did the chaos unfold? Temples stockpiled enormous vats of beer, but this wasn't your average brew. Infused with potent hallucinogens like lotus extracts, a mere gulp could shatter perceptions, inducing vivid visions and altered states. Revelers proclaimed, "We are now the gods' receptacles." Ethics, statutes, social norms, tossed aside like yesterday's papyrus. Hierarchies crumbled, Bonds between overlords and serfs, spouses, kin, all evaporated in the haze. Mobs surged onto the avenues, ensnaring bystanders, compelling them into the melee. Bedlam ensued. Behaviors that would warrant execution on ordinary days, now exalted as pious deeds. Paint the picture in your mind, thoroughfares alive with a cacophony of chants, howls, brawls, sobs, and guffaws. Individuals, bereft of inhibitions, lunging at one another in primal urges. This transcended festivity. It was a societal implosion on a grand scale. Historical annals note casualties aplenty, trampled underfoot, grievously wounded, even fatalities. Yet these were reframed as divine imprints or celestial selections rationalized away. Why sanction such anarchy? On the spiritual front, to placate godly ire and personally taste omnipotence. Politically, a clever release valve, allowing the masses to vent accumulated grievances once annually, thereby fortifying the status quo. Foreign observers were aghast, envoys from Mesopotamia jotted in their dispatches, under the guise of worship, Egyptians devolve into beasts. The spectacle was so extreme that neighboring cultures recoiled in disbelief. Within Egypt's borders, however, every outrage was sanctified, turmoil and brutality, mere tributes to the pantheon. Afflicted. The gods have marked you. Deceased. Ascended to paradise. The hangover, literal and figurative, was devastating. Amnesia plagued many. Households fractured irreparably. Offspring conceived amid the tumult bore lifelong stigmas. Economically, the toll was staggering. Urban centers ground to a halt for days, productivity plummeting. Nevertheless, the rite endured, recurring yearly as a cornerstone of societal equilibrium. Archaeological finds reveal dedicated chambers in temples, elongated, confined spaces tailored for these ecstatic gatherings. To encapsulate, far from a frivolous party, this was violence and disorder enshrined as institution, veiled in piety to bolster the establishment. The ultimate irony, wouldn't you agree? Now ponder this. Could such extravagance persist indefinitely? Absolutely not. Egypt's collision with external powers, first the Greeks, then the Romans, spelled doom for their ecstatic excesses. Enter the Ptolemaic dynasty. Post-Alexander the Great, Hellenic overlords assumed control. Greeks prized rationality, philosophical debates, mathematical precision, logical rigor. To them, Egypt's drunken orgies screamed superstition, derangement, savagery. Yet the native populace tenaciously clung to their heritage. Chronicles recount Cleopatra-Thum's attempt to curtail the festival, eyeing alliances with Rome. The backlash was ferocious. Clergy and traditionalists decried it as invoking divine wrath, sparking widespread unrest. She relented. Her descendant, Cleopatra VII, the iconic one, employed subtler tactics. Outwardly, she presented a diluted, palatable rendition for Roman scrutiny, while clandestinely preserving the authentic rites behind temple veils. A duplicitous balancing act. Alas, it appeased neither side. Romans remained wary, purists felt betrayed. The tipping point arrived with Rome's annexation in 30 BC. Emperor Augustus integrated Egypt as the imperial territory. Roman auditors delved into local customs, unearthing murals, manuscripts, and ceremonial paraphernalia that left them reeling in revulsion. Imperial logs lambasted these so-called temples resembled dens of wild animals, not abodes of divinity. Retaliation was swift and merciless. Soldiers razed artworks, incinerated texts, and executed recalcitrant priests. A methodical purge that extinguished Egypt's age-old traditions. Thus, the multi-millennial customs met their end. Yet the scars on the survivors, those consecrated youths, the anonymous victims, festered, bequeathing a legacy of collective trauma that echoed through generations. The profound irony. While Roman imperialism quashed Egypt's ways, our contemporary ignorance stems from yet another wave of suppression. The Victorian epoch in the 1800s. That era witnessed an Egyptology explosion. Adventurers and academics scouring deserts, unearthing mummies and relics galore. However, much of what surfaced was deemed too risque or appalling for public consumption, consigned to obscurity rather than museum halls. Take Giovanni Belzoni in 1817. He slathered plaster over temple frescoes depicting explicit scenes, deeming them unsuitable for refined audiences. Auguste Mariette went further, sequestering erotic artifacts in his private trove, away from prying eyes. Flinders Petrie was unapologetic. His journals confessed to deliberately torching papyri and shattering sculptures, insisting such indecencies must never surface. The scholarly community echoed this. Translators expunged or euphemized salacious passages from ancient texts. The renowned Eber's Papyrus, a medical compendium, had its sexual health sections surgically removed during rendition, all in the name of preserving Victorian propriety. This legacy persists. Wander into premier institutions like the Louvre or the Metropolitan Museum, and you'll find vaults brimming with sequestered artifacts, thousands labeled for scholarly eyes only, effectively barred from lay view. In our digital age, the veil endures. Certain Wikipedia entries on taboo topics are locked down, stifling updates from fresh scholarship. Consequently, the Egypt we romanticize is a confection of gilded opulence, monumental architecture, and treasure-laden crypts. Lurking unseen, the barbarities we're systematically shielded from. So what wisdom do we extract? It's not merely that ancient Egypt harbored horrors. The crux, throughout history, those in power have habitually obscured discomforting verities, reshaping narratives to suit their agendas. Just as antique priests cloaked juvenile anguish in sacred rhetoric, Victorian erudites entombed awkward annals under decorum's shroud. Thus, the burning query, in this very moment, how vast is the expanse of history we're oblivious to? As we draw the curtains on this odyssey, we've traversed over 3 millennia of concealed Egyptian lore, a realm where a monarch's bedroom prowess dictated national destiny, where juveniles and bondsmen were fodder for faith-fueled machinations, and where annual festivals plunged the populace into orchestrated mayhem. These elements were first throttled by Roman conquest, then further entombed by Victorian censors, vanishing from collective memory. The pivotal enigma: how does the fusion of spiritual conviction and authoritarian greed birth such systematized atrocities? Societies normalized palpable suffering under pretexts of divinity or stability, yielding heaps of voiceless casualties whose existences were pulverized. Recounting this has given me chills multiple times. It's that visceral. Why? Because these shadows aren't confined to antiquity. The mechanisms of authority concealing facts, legitimizing harm via creed or ethics, persist unabated today. History cycles if we avert our gaze, hence the stark takeaway. Amid Egypt's resplendent veneer lie the muted echoes of martyrs we must honor. Though excised from tomes, their essence demands remembrance. If this narrative jarred you, if it unveiled novelties that floored you, dive into the suggested videos flashing on your screen. This platform brims with obscured chronicles yearning for light. Smash that subscribe. Your engagement amplifies these suppressed narratives. In closing, heed this. The annals we've imbibed are invariably scripted from the victor's perch, yet the true treasure resides in the expunged utterances. Ancient Egypt's veiled saga exemplifies this. Cling to it, etch it in memory.